don't touch those files." The command came from across the room, but Ramona Keyes had already stopped moving. Two of the Meridian's floor managers had stepped in front of the office door, blocking the only exit. Vivica Strand walked toward her slowly, heels clicking against the tile, a thin smile on her lips that never quite reached her eyes. "We've been watching you for weeks," Vivica said. "I haven't done anything." "The register is short $4,000. Vivica set a folder on the desk between them. "Your initials are on every reconciliation sheet." "Because I'm the bookkeeper. My initials are supposed to be there." The first manager grabbed her arm before she could say another word. The second one reached for the filing cabinet behind her, pulling drawers open, scattering papers across the floor. Ramona tried to pull free. Someone shoved her hard into the edge of the desk. The corner caught her just above the cheekbone. Pain bloomed instantly. She pressed her hand over it and felt the warmth of blood against her palm. No one stopped. The kitchen staff crowded the doorway. A line cook she had worked beside for 2 years looked away before her eyes could meet his. A hostess she had covered for last winter, when the girl's mother was in the hospital, and she needed the shift pay, stared at the floor. No one said a word. Vivica Strand picked up Ramona's tote bag from the chair and turned it upside down over the desk. "All I need is one reason," she said pleasantly, "and you're done." Then the hallway went quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of people holding their breath, the quiet of people stepping back. Alistair Rowe had arrived. He was 42 years old, the kind of man who never needed to announce himself because every room he entered already knew he was coming. Founder and silent owner of the Meridian Group. 14 restaurants, 3 hotels, a private investment firm with offices in 7 cities. Publicly, a philanthropist. Privately, the man whose name made other dangerous men careful about how they spoke. He stood in the doorway of the back office and looked at Ramona's face. The cut above her cheek, the blood on her fingers, the papers scattered across the floor. His voice, when it came, was almost quiet. Let go of her. Both managers released Ramona's arm at the same moment, as though they had rehearsed it. Alistair did not look at them. He looked only at Ramona. "Come with me." She followed him into the small private sitting room off the main corridor because there was nothing else to do. He closed the door. A first aid kit appeared on the table within minutes. She didn't see who brought it. "I can take care of it," she said. "I know." He pulled a clean cloth from the kit and held it toward her. "But you don't have to right now." She pressed it against her cheek and looked at the floor, because looking at him felt like too much. She apologized twice, for the disruption, for the inconvenience, for taking up space that wasn't hers to take. "Stop," he said, not unkindly. "The person who should be apologizing is not in this room." Outside, his head of operations, a quiet man named Perry, was already moving. Within 4 minutes, every entrance to the Meridian's back offices was sealed. Every security recording from the previous 72 hours was pulled from the system. Every employee in the building was instructed to remain on premises until further notice. The investigation took 47 minutes. The footage was clear. Vivica Strand had removed 4 envelopes of petty cash from the main safe 3 days earlier, during a shift Ramona had not worked. A second recording showed her photographing Ramona's reconciliation sheets from a distance and then altering the totals on the printouts before filing them. The cash had never been in Ramona's possession. The discrepancy had been manufactured. Perry brought the summary to Alistair in 3 sentences. Alistair listened without expression. "Bring everyone to the dining room," he said. 10 minutes. Every employee at the Meridian that evening stood in rows between the tables. Servers, kitchen staff, hosts, bartenders, cleaning crew, office staff. Vivica Strand stood near the front with her arms crossed, still wearing the expression of someone who had already won. Alistair walked in without hurrying. He looked at Vivica first. "Did you accuse Ramona Keyes of theft?" "I did." "Did you arrange for security to restrain her?" "It was standard procedure for." "Did she bleed?" The room went very still. Vivica's chin lifted slightly. She struggled. Alistair let the silence sit for a moment. "The investigation is finished." His voice was level. The money was never missing. The discrepancy was created. The footage confirms it. Miss Strand removed the cash herself and altered the records to implicate someone else. A sound moved through the room. Not quite a gasp, more like 60 people exhaling at the same time. Viveca's certainty flickered. "You can't possibly." "You're terminated. Effective this moment. Your personal items will be boxed and delivered. You will not return to this building. I have a contract." "Perry." Perry stepped forward. Two members of the security team moved to either side of Vivica. She continued talking about lawyers, about wrongful termination, about what she would tell the press. No one responded. The doors opened. She was escorted out. The room remained standing. Alistair turned toward the staff. What happened tonight was not an accounting error. It was not a misunderstanding. His gaze moved slowly across the room. An innocent person was physically hurt and publicly accused of a crime she did not commit. That happened here in this building, with many of you present. He paused. Several of you watched. None of you spoke. A few people lowered their eyes. The line cook near the back had gone red. "I don't expect perfection," Alistair continued. "I do expect decency. If you ever witness something like this again, under any management, in any property that carries my name, you will speak. Or you will find somewhere else to work." He looked toward the back of the room, where Ramona stood near the service entrance, with her arms loose at her sides, her hand still pressed lightly to the cut on her face. Justice had been delivered. The evidence was on record. The woman responsible was gone. Ramona wasn't smiling. Her eyes were dry and distant, the way someone looks when they have been hurt too many times to feel surprised anymore. She pressed her lips together and nodded once when she caught him looking. Alistair understood in that moment that he had solved tonight's problem. He had not solved anything else. The following weeks were quiet in the way that follows a storm. Surface calm, but something had shifted in the pressure beneath it. The Meridian's staff moved differently. Conversations in the break room were more careful. People held doors. Someone started a card system for employee birthdays, which Ramona had nothing to do with, and which she accepted with soft surprise every time. She herself changed nothing. She arrived at 7. She left when the books were clean, which was sometimes 9. She caught errors that weren't in her department and fixed them without mentioning it. She made a note when one of the dishwashers had been skipping lunch. Not because the man had said anything, but because she paid attention, and quietly added an extra meal to his station ticket every afternoon for 3 weeks, coded under a line item she invented for kitchen quality testing. Alistair noticed because Perry noticed everything and reported it without being asked. "She's been running a secondary budget reconciliation for the East Side location," Perry said one morning, setting a printout on the desk. "Voluntarily. Caught a vendor overcharge that would have cost us $11,000 by the end of the quarter." Alistair looked at the numbers. "Is she being compensated for it?" "No." "Fix that." Perry hesitated. "She'll probably try to refuse it." "Tell her it's a correction to a previous error in her base salary." Alistair picked up his coffee. "She won't argue with a correction. She's an accountant." He was right. She didn't argue. What she did was leave a handwritten note on the corrected paycheck envelope. "Thank you. This wasn't necessary." 3 words crossed out, 3 different words in their place. Then those crossed out too, as though she had started to write something real, and then decided, at the last moment, that she shouldn't take up that much space. He kept the note. He told himself it was just an operational detail, a record, the kind of thing a thorough man kept. Perry didn't say anything, but he watched. One evening, Alistair came through the restaurant's back corridor after a call that had run 2 hours past when it should have ended. The kitchen was dark. A faint sound came from the small accounting office at the end of the hall. Not typing, something else. He slowed. Through the half-open door, Ramona sat at the side table with a stack of printed spreadsheets and a legal pad. She was not running numbers. She was writing names. He watched for a moment before he understood. She was compiling a list of employees whose hours had been shorted during Vivifica's last 2 months managing payroll. Not her job. Not anyone's job, technically, because the discrepancy was small enough that it had gone unnoticed. She was going to correct it anyway, on her own time, using her own system. He went back to his office and called Perry. Photonize retroactive corrections for any payroll shortages going back 8 weeks. Full restoration. Use the discretionary operations fund. He paused. And don't tell her I know, Perry said. Yes, sir, in the tone of a man who was beginning to find his employer's behavior very interesting. One afternoon, Alistair happened to pass the small courtyard behind the kitchen and saw Ramona sitting with a first-year server, the one who had been transferred from the downtown location and hadn't yet found her footing. They were not talking about work. The girl was crying, just slightly, and Ramona had both hands wrapped around her own coffee cup and was saying something. Alistair couldn't hear through the glass. Whatever it was, made the girl laugh despite herself. When Perry handed him the background report on Ramona 2 weeks later, Alistair set aside 2 hours to read it. There was a photograph from her college years. She was laughing at something off camera, and her smile then looked almost identical to the one she wore now. The comments someone had written beneath that photograph online were not. There was documentation of her first serious relationship. A man she had been with for 3 years who ended things at a mutual friend's party after his co-workers spent the evening making jokes he didn't correct, and who told her afterward, with apparent sincerity, that he simply could not build the future he wanted with someone who attracted that kind of attention. There were 11 job applications spanning 7 years. Outstanding references on everyone. Performance reviews that used words like exceptional and precise and indispensable. And in the interview notes, written by people who apparently saw no contradiction in recording such things, phrases like, not suitable for client-facing role, image inconsistent with brand positioning, would not represent company standards at senior level. Not one of them mentioned her work. Alistair closed the folder. He sat for a long time looking at nothing in particular. He had negotiated hostile acquisitions. He had ended conflicts that other men in his position had let run for decades. He had made decisions that moved money and power across the city, like weather systems. There was almost nothing he encountered that didn't have a solution, if you were willing to find it. He could not negotiate away 15 years of someone being told, in ways both blunt and carefully polite, that the shape of her body was more relevant than anything she could do or think or offer. He could not give back what had been taken from her, one dismissal at a time. For perhaps the first time since he had taken control of the Row organization, Alistair felt the particular frustration of a man who could solve almost anything and was sitting in front of the thing he couldn't. He picked up his phone and called Perry. "Tell me what she likes," he said. A pause. "Sir?" "Ramona, what does she order when she eats here? What does she talk about? What makes her laugh?" Another pause, this one more thoughtful. "She orders the soup when it's cold and the citrus salad when it isn't. She talks about her grandmother's recipes. She laughs when something surprises her. Really laughs, not the polite kind. Perry was quiet for a moment. She mentioned once that she wanted to run a department someday, not for the title, because she thought she could do it better than it was being done. "Thank you," Alistair said. He sat with that for a while longer. Then he started making a different kind of plan. The Meridian Group's annual fundraising dinner benefiting literacy and workforce development had been scheduled for 6 months. 500 guests. 3-course menu. Live auction. Coverage from 2 local news affiliates and a business journal. Alistair made one change to the planning roster 2 weeks before the event. He wanted Ramona Keyes on the coordination team. The event's director blinked. "She's in accounting. She's also the reason we didn't lose $11,000 to a vendor in April," Alistair said. "Put her on the team." When Perry delivered the news, Ramona's first response was that there had to be a mistake. Her second response was to ask if she could have 3 days to review the guest logistics before her first team meeting. She arrived at that meeting with a color-coded spreadsheet, a question about the accessibility of the coat check for guests with mobility aids, and a quiet suggestion that the staff briefing be moved to a different room because the acoustics in the current one made it difficult to hear in the back rows. No one had thought of either thing. By the night of the dinner, the staff liked her. Not the polite, careful liking of people tolerating someone new, but the real kind. They saved her a plate before service. They texted her when something went sideways. They asked her opinion on small decisions, because her opinions turned out to be worth having. She wore a deep burgundy dress that evening, simple and well-fitted, and she looked into the mirror in the employee restroom for exactly 4 seconds before she made herself stop second-guessing and walked out. The dinner was moving smoothly when Lawson Taft arrived. He was 60, wealthy, in the way that makes certain men assume authority they have never been required to earn, and he had attended this event for the past 4 years as a major donor. He moved through the room the way men like him always did, slowly, looking at things as though assessing their value. He found Ramona near the registration table, checking off arrivals. "I know you," he said. She looked up and smiled politely. "Good evening, Mr. Taft. Your table is—" "No, I know you from somewhere." His eyes moved over her in a way that had nothing to do with recognition. "You're the bookkeeper. The one there was that trouble with—" Several nearby conversations slowed. Ramona kept her voice even. "That matter was resolved months ago. If you'll let me show you to your—" Still, he tilted his head. Bit of a step up from the back office, isn't it? His smile didn't move. "Playing host at a $500 a plate dinner." He glanced around at the room. "I imagine some people find it charming, the whole underdog thing." "Mr. Taft." He reached out and took hold of her wrist. Not violently, just completely without asking. The grip of a man who had never once been required to ask. "I'm not criticizing," he said. His voice dropped into something approximating warmth, which made it worse. "It's sweet, honestly. The big girl who does the numbers gets to come to the party." He smiled at her. "Just don't let them give you ideas above your station, sweetheart. That never ends well for people like you." The sound in the room changed. Not loud, just gone, the way air pressure shifts before something breaks. Ramona had stopped breathing evenly. She was aware of it, and she could not make it stop. The chandeliers above blurred very slightly at the edges. She was not entirely here anymore. She was 19 years old, and standing in a college living room while a boy she had trusted laughed at something she hadn't heard, and then looked at her, still laughing, and said, "You know I'm just being nice to you, right?" She was 24 in a job interview on Michigan Avenue, doing everything right, watching the interviewer smile, go careful and managed. She was last October, right here in this building, hearing Viveka Strand's voice say some people just aren't built for front-facing work. Her head dropped slightly. It was automatic, learned. The posture of someone who had spent years practicing how to take up less space than the situation required. Around her, well-dressed people in expensive shoes looked at their phones, looked at the ceiling, looked anywhere but at her. No one moved. At the far end of the room, Alistair had been standing at the speaking podium while the evening's MC completed the introduction. The applause had already started. 3 sentences remained in the prepared remarks. He was already walking. He didn't run. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't do anything that could be described as rushing, which made it somehow more unsettling to everyone who watched him cross the entire length of the room with the absolute focus of a man who had decided something and was now simply implementing it. Lawson Taft released Ramona's wrist a half-second before Alistair reached them, as though some instinct had fired just a moment too late. Alistair stopped in front of her first. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head automatically, but her breathing was still wrong, and her hands were pressed flat against her sides, and he could see the effort it was taking her to hold herself upright. He reached out and took her hand, not tightly, just steadily, the way you offer someone a railing when the ground is uneven. "You don't have to stand here by yourself," he said quietly. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then he looked at Lawson Taft. "You put your hands on one of my people." Taft laughed once, the involuntary kind. "We were having a conversation." "You held her wrist while she asked you to stop." "That's not a conversation." Alistair's voice didn't rise. "You spoke to her the way people speak when they believe the person in front of them has no recourse. She's a bookkeeper. She's the reason this event came in under budget, ran on schedule, and has the highest advance ticket sales this dinner has seen in 7 years. Staff held Taft's gaze without effort. "I suggest you think carefully about what you were going to say next." Taft thought carefully. He did not say anything. Alistair turned toward the room. The MC was still at the podium. 500 people were watching. 3 cameras were running. He walked to the stage. "I had prepared remarks this evening," he said, "about the Foundation's work and the communities we're trying to reach." He looked out at the room. "I'm going to set those aside and tell you something true instead." No one moved. 6 months ago, an employee in one of my properties was falsely accused of theft. The accusation was fabricated by someone in a position of authority, carried out in front of her colleagues, and she was physically hurt in the process. He paused. An investigation cleared her within the hour. The individual responsible was removed immediately. The records were corrected. The room was absolutely still. But I learned something that evening that I've been thinking about ever since. He looked toward the back of the room, where Ramona stood with her hand still loose at her side. The person who was hurt had not been hurt overnight. She had been hurt. Quietly, consistently, for years, by every employer who looked at her and decided her value based on something other than her work, by every colleague who made a joke they told themselves didn't count, by every room full of people who looked away when she needed someone to say something. A few people near the front were very still. She fixed payroll errors that weren't her responsibility. She caught a vendor fraud that saved this company $11,000. She organized this event in 2 weeks. With more precision and more care than most people bring to work, they have spent years training for. His voice stayed level, and she did all of it while spending what I imagine was a considerable amount of energy making herself small enough that no one would find her inconvenient. He stepped down from the stage. "Ramona Keyes helped make this evening possible. If you want to thank someone for the dinner you're about to enjoy, and the work this foundation does, thank her." The first applause came from the kitchen entrance, where 3 servers started clapping before anyone in formal wear did. Then the bar staff. Then the event coordinators at the side tables. Then, slowly, the guests rose. Ramona stood in the middle of it, with her eyes very bright and her lips pressed together, looking at a point slightly above the crowd's heads, the way people look when they are trying very hard not to cry in public and losing the effort. She was not invisible. For the first time in longer than she could remember clearly, no one was letting her be invisible. Alistair walked toward her through the applause. "You belong here," he said. "Just that. No qualification attached." She laughed once, a small sound, unsteady. "I've been waiting for someone to say that for approximately 30 years. Then I'm sorry it took this long." As for Lawson Taft, by the time the appetizer course was cleared, he had quietly found his coat. By the end of the week, Perry had delivered documentation confirming the end of 4 separate business arrangements. The charitable sponsorship was declined in writing. The invitation to the following year's event was not extended. No dramatic announcement, no public statement, just the complete and efficient removal of someone who had demonstrated what he was worth. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening when the restaurant was closed to the public, Alistair found Ramona in the back courtyard, organizing the outdoor furniture inventory for winter storage. Nobody had asked her to do it. She looked up when she heard his footstep. Mr. Rowe. Alistair. She hesitated, set down her clipboard. "I've been calling you Mr. Rowe for 2 years. "I know. It would feel strange. Most things worth doing feel strange the first time." He sat down on the edge of one of the covered chairs. "What are you actually doing out here?" "The furniture manifest hasn't been updated since 2021. "That's not an answer." She was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she sat down across from him. "I don't know how to not be useful," she said. "That's the honest answer. If I'm useful, I have a reason to be wherever I am. If I stop being useful," she didn't finish the sentence. "Then what?" "Then I'm just a person taking up space. And I've had a lot of feedback over the years that I'm not particularly entitled to do that." He looked at her steadily. "Who gave you that feedback?" She laughed a little, the kind that comes out when something isn't funny. "Everyone, in various ways. Nicely, sometimes. Nicely is almost worse." She looked at the covered chairs around them. "A boy in college told me he'd been kind to me because he felt sorry for me, in front of 6 of his friends. I laughed like it was a joke, and then I went home and I tried to figure out how to become a different person." She paused. "I've been trying to figure that out ever since." "Did it work?" "I lost weight and then gained it back. I cut my hair, grew it back. I spoke more quietly in meetings. I stopped raising my hand." She met his eyes briefly. "None of it worked. I was still the same size and the same person, and people were still going to decide what I was worth based on what I looked like. So," she picked up her clipboard again, "I decided to be useful instead. That, at least, was something I could control." Alistair was quiet for a moment. "The first night," he said, "after Viveka, you weren't relieved." She looked at him. "You should have been. You were innocent. It was proven she was gone. But you looked," he considered, "tired." "I was. Not because of that night. No." She folded her hands in her lap. "Because it was just another version of the same thing. Every time someone decides I'm guilty before the evidence is in, at a job interview, at a party, in a back office, it's the same moment. And you can win the moment. You can be proven right every time." She stopped. But the winning doesn't put back what they took." Her voice was steady, and it was the most difficult kind of steady. The kind that costs something. "Every time someone looks at me and decides I'm less before I've said a word, they take something. And being vindicated afterward doesn't return it. You just stand there with the truth and a cut above your eye, and everyone looking at you like the crisis is over. She shook her head, but nobody said anything while it was happening. That's the part that stays. That's the part I carry, because if nobody said anything, somewhere in the back of my mind I will always be wondering if they agreed with her. Alistair sat with that without rushing past it. I should have had people in that hallway who spoke up, he said finally. That's on me, not the investigation, the 15 minutes before I arrived. You can't be everywhere. No, but I can build something that doesn't require me to be. He looked at her directly. I've been thinking about that since October. A formal structure. Not a policy memo, an actual department. Someone to run it whose judgment I trust completely. He paused. Someone who understands what it costs to be overlooked, because they have been paying that cost their entire life and choosing kindness anyway. Ramona went very still. I'm not offering you this because of what happened, he said carefully. I want to be clear about that. I'm offering it because I have watched you work for 2 years, because the way you treated the people around you when you had every reason to be bitter about how they treated you, that is not something I can train into someone. You either have it or you don't. She was looking at him in a way she wasn't quite aware of yet. The way people look when something they stopped believing in starts to seem real again. Alistair. It came out quietly, the first time she'd said it. Yes. Why did you walk across that room? At the gala. You were mid-introduction. The cameras were running. She shook her head slightly. You could have handled it afterward, quietly, without any of it. He thought about how to answer honestly. Because I watched 60 people do nothing in that back office in October, he said. And I watched it happen again at the gala for about 4 seconds before I started moving, and I decided I was not going to be one of the 60. Not that night. He looked at her, and not because it was strategic or good for the company, because you are the best person in any room you walk into, and you have spent your whole life being told otherwise, and I am not willing to watch that happen anymore. The courtyard was very quiet. A car alarm went on somewhere in the block behind the restaurant, and then off. Ramona Keyes had cried twice in the past year, in places where people could see her. Both times had been from pain. This was something different. The feeling of a door opening in a room she had walled up so long ago, she had stopped noticing the shape of it. I don't entirely know what to do with that, she said honestly. That's all right. He reached over and covered her hand with his, steady, unhurried. You don't have to know tonight. She turned her hand over beneath his, just slightly. I've spent a lot of years trying to become someone worth choosing, she said. Someone smaller, someone that fit. She looked at their hands. I kept thinking if I could just adjust enough, someday someone would look at me and actually see. She stopped. What? She shook her head. Something worth looking at. Ramona. She looked up. I have been looking, Alistair said, since approximately the 3rd week you worked here, and I have never once needed you to adjust a single thing. She held that for a long moment. Then she laughed. A real one, sudden and unguarded, the kind that surprised her. That might be the most terrifying thing anyone has ever said to me. Why? Because I believe you. She looked at him with something undefended in her expression, something that had not been there before. And I'm not used to that. He smiled then, quiet and certain. Get used to it. The first time he kissed her, it was neither dramatic nor sudden. It was the end of a long silence, and the beginning of something they had both been moving toward without admitting it, and it was exactly as careful, and exactly as sure as every other decision he had ever made that he knew, without question, was right. 6 months later, the Meridian Group announced the formation of its Employee Advocacy Office, the first formal structure of its kind in the company's history. Confidential support for workers facing workplace misconduct. Emergency financial assistance. Anonymous reporting systems. Quarterly reviews of management practices across all 14 properties. Its director was introduced at a company-wide meeting on a Thursday morning in March. Ramona Keyes walked into that meeting in a slate blue blazer she had bought the previous weekend. She had looked in the mirror that morning for a full 10 seconds before she went downstairs. She was not trying to look like someone else. She was simply, for the first time in longer than she could calculate, exactly who she was. And that, it turned out, was more than enough. When a reporter at the press conference asked Alistair when he had known, when exactly he had decided that Ramona Keyes was someone he wanted beside him, in his company, in his life, he did not look at the cameras. He looked at her. "The night I watched her stand in a room full of people who said nothing," he said, "and then come back to work the next morning and take care of every single one of them anyway." He paused. "I have spent 20 years in rooms full of powerful people. I have never met anyone stronger than that." Ramona, standing 3 feet away, looked at the floor for exactly 1 second. Then she looked up. She did not look away. That was new, and it was hers. And no manager with a grudge, no donor with a theory about her station, no accumulated weight of 30 years of being told to take up less room. None of it was ever going to take it from her again.